Hi everybody, Jason Smith here. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Truth About Social Ads. I'm an agency owner specializing in Facebook and Instagram ads, and I have dedicated my professional life to helping you learn what others won't tell you about Facebook ads. You know, I believe there's so much information that no one is sharing about Facebook ads and how you can fail and win running ads for your business and when it's time to hire an agency. That's why I'm here bringing ideas and information that can help you run successful Facebook and Instagram ads. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of The Truth About Social Ads. We're super excited about today's episode. We have a close friend of ours and a super awesome dude on the show today. Eric and I are super excited. We're going to be diving into Facebook versus Google, an important topic. And the reason why we're doing Facebook versus Google is because we get questions like this all the time about this topic. Should I be doing Google? Should I be doing Facebook? Should I be doing both? We're going to go through all that today in this episode and answer that for you. And no better way to do that but to have Kasim on the show today. He's the founder and CEO of Solutions 8, one of the world's top-ranked Google Ads agency. He's a recipient of the Arizona Interactive Marketing Association's 2017 TIM Award for Persons of the Year. Kasim was also named as one of the top 50 digital marketing thought leaders in the United States by the University of Missouri in 2020. He recently was hand-selected as a traffic coach for digitalmarketer.com's elite coaching program by their executive team. And he's got a book out, 7 Principles of Effective Digital Marketing, was featured as one of the top 100 digital marketing books of all time by Book Authority. Dude, Kasim, what's up, man? How do I get a freaking bio like that, man? That's freaking awesome.
You just got to be really comfortable with lying, and then it gets really easy.
Well, Kasim, go ahead and introduce yourself, please. Tell the audience who you are, although I just did that, but would love to hear it in your own words, please.
Yeah, well, my name's Kasim. It rhymes with awesome because my dad wanted me beat up in high school. That worked like a charm, by the way. You know what I like to say is I'm an epic failure. I've gotten really good at failing forward, to steal from John C. Maxwell, and that's served me so far. So, you know, if there's anything that I'm better at than anybody else on the planet, it's just failing really well and also not letting it impact my ego.
Yeah, well, I think we're all versions of failure to some point for sure. So, yeah, thanks for being on today, man. We're covering a very important topic that we get asked all the time. And this could end up being like a couple different podcast episodes because I know we're not going to be able to cover everything today. And I don't want to do a 4-hour podcast episode of why I think Facebook is better and why you think Google's better. Or if, you know, they're both awesome, which we know they are. And we get asked tons of questions daily on this topic. It's like, oh, should I be doing this? And should I be doing that? And for the record, Kasim's an awesome dude. You know, we've known each other for a bit now and love working with him. We work pretty closely together. We refer business back and forth to each other. And we truly appreciate everything you do for us, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's a credit to y'all because until I found you guys, I didn't have anybody to send Facebook work to. Like, it's such I hope you don't mind me saying this because I don't want to slander our collective ecosystem, but it's such a rat's nest of just wannabes or people that say like, oh yeah, we can do that. No problem. And then there's no results. And, you know, when y'all found, I mean, it was a godsend to be able to say like, yeah, I know the guys. Let me connect you.
Yeah.
And dude, I remember, Kasim, when you sent us the first client you sent us, we got on a call and you were like, is this going to work? And we were like, nope, we do this all the time. We have good relationships. And that was, months ago. And it's been a great relationship. So thank you for everything that you've sent us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody's super happy so far. So appreciate you all making me look good.
Hey, and you know what? Honestly, it's also, we didn't really have a Google agency either to refer business back and forth to, and really to like partner and work with, because that's really hard to find, where not only do you refer business back and forth, but we actually work together on some accounts and some clients, and it's just a great relationship. So we appreciate that, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's funny about the difference between, just talking about the difference between Google and Facebook. So far too often, anytime you have two cooks in the kitchen, two agencies, it becomes like an us versus them.
Yeah.
And it's such a stupid approach because like Facebook feeds Google and Google feeds Facebook. And if you can get folks to work together, like that now you have the client's best interest at heart instead of us thinking like, oh, the attribution is really geared in the wrong way and we should be able to take credit for that. Like if you can get folks that just, want to be synergistic about it, and we've seen those results with our clients now, which is really cool.
Yeah. And that's why we share creatives back and forth. Hey, this ad copy worked really good. Just FYI, it may not work on Google or YouTube, but here it is. Right. And that's the cool thing about, I think, our agencies. We work together so well. We're not afraid. Like, man, if you get to learn something about Facebook from us and we get to learn something about Google from you guys, hell, that's what it's all about, really. There's plenty of business out there. So anyways, Eric, why don't you go ahead and dive in about what we're going to be talking about today? I'll let you kind of take it from here. So
okay, cool. So just to cue this up for the listeners. So I come from the skateboard industry, and growing up, there's these epic videos. It was Rodney Mullen versus Day One song. And I used to work in the skateboard industry. I don't know Rodney, but I did know Day One. And these were like the most epic battles that everybody would watch. Of course, they're friends. And that's kind of how we wanted to approach today's episode is Kasim is someone we've grown to really trust in what he does on Google, which includes, of course, Google YouTube, all the different products that Google has. And so we wanted to talk about the differences because we get asked this. In fact, we got an email just yesterday or the day before yesterday. Hey, I want to start running YouTube ads. Should I do it? And we get asked that all the time. So we wanted to dive in today and talk about the strengths of Facebook, the strengths of Google, the differences, how we approach things, and really kind of take that approach. Kasim said it a minute ago, is we're not trying to knock each other down. There's just different strengths. And by allowing each other to shine, we've really come up with a synergistic, cool working relationship. So let's start off with the metrics that we look at on Facebook. And then I want to kind of defer. I have a ton of questions for you, Kasim. I don't think we'll be able to cover it all today. But, Facebook, we primarily look at, and obviously this isn't going to encompass everything, but the number of people reached, the CPA or CPL, which is cost per acquisition or cost per lead, the click-through rate, the return on ad spend. Those are the basic ones that we look at on Facebook. So I know very little about Google and YouTube. Jason knows more than me, but to bring it to Kasim, how does that work, Kasim? Being that you manage YouTube and you manage Google search, placements, email. On Facebook, we click all placements and it blasts it out everywhere. Is it similar on Google with YouTube? How does that work on your end?
It's a really good question. Google is forcing people, or trying to force people anyway, towards trusting the machine. So when you sign up for a Google Ads account, what's really interesting about it is you'll go to sign up and you actually have to ask to have all of the features. When you sign up for a Google Ads account, it puts you in this weird little sandbox to where it's like the Google Lite version. And you just give Google your credit card and some tips, basically, and it goes off and it builds everything for you. But there at the very bottom, if you ever sign up for a new account, you'll notice that it says switch to expert mode. And you've never seen smaller font in a Google Google anything. And when you switch to expert mode, now you've got like all the things. And when you go to build your campaigns, Google continues to try to funnel you towards letting them take control. So there's something called goal guidance. And if you choose goal guidance, Google's going to kind of do the things on your behalf. And then if you try to create a campaign without goal guidance, you actually lose functionality. So they're trying to penalize you. But anyway, I'm so sorry, dude. I derailed there.
No, that's what we want to know. That's actually very interesting. Keep going. Yeah.
So I created a course recently on how to run Google Ads, and I called it You versus Google. And I called it You versus Google because the thing to know when you're running Google Ads is it's you against them, not you with them. They're against you every step of the way. And anytime you see recommended in brackets, it means you're about to be taken advantage of. And you can run all these separates like search, display, shopping, video, app, smart, local, like all of those are separate channels and networks. Or you can use, the algorithmic approach and kind of let Google take it and run with it, which sometimes is advisable, but not always. And then it'll be spread out across Google's entire ecosystem. So Google's whole ecosystem can be viewed as kind of like one singular entity, and it's an expansive entity. The Google Display Network reaches 90% of all internet users on the planet, 65% of whom are reached on a daily basis. It's the most prolific front-facing thing on the internet. But it also has a massive amount of irrelevant traffic. So like if you're going to use the Google Display Network, you need to make sure that you're using it in a really strategic way. So if you go roll up a Google campaign, Google will automatically opt you into search and display. And now all the strategic decisions you're making are applied to both. Well, that's moronic. That's stupid because they're two entirely different networks. One's inbound, one's outbound. One is like really high commercial intent. One is just like, everybody with eyeballs. And so my opinion is anytime you're running Google Ads, you want to split things up according to the strategy that is most relevant for that network, unless there's a reason not to. And I can talk to you about some of those reasons, like why you'd want to use the whole ecosystem, but I don't want to monopolize conversation. So how did I do there? Was that a good enough answer?
Yeah. And so a few follow-up questions there. So when you onboard clients, do you charge more per placement because it's different creatives, or just real quick for us, there's no difference? Like sometimes we'll do different creatives, but we use all placements and we've found that to be best practice and most effective on Facebook. So is it like a different charge for a client if they do YouTube, if they do search? How does that work as far as charging the client?
Yeah, the benefit with Facebook is there's way more continuity to that network.
Yeah.
Like even when Facebook has separate placements, it tends to be kind of like more or less the same type of prospect in a very similar environment. With Google, if you think about the difference between like inbound search compared to Gmail promotions, right? Yeah. Compared to YouTube videos, compared to Google Display Network, which is like banner ads, like those are four very different, very disparate advertising mechanisms. And so we've got tiered pricing. Search is kind of standalone. It's our basic package. And then we charge more if you want to run shopping. And then like if you want like the whole kit and caboodle, shopping, display, YouTube, DSA, et cetera, then that's a separate package. I got to be honest, it's hard. It's hard to figure out on the inbound if and when a client is going to be, a super big nightmare. Or if, they might want to run all the placements, but they end up being really easy. So we generally charge a percentage of spend, which I know that's another thing that like Facebook ad agencies don't do as much, but with Google ad agencies, because the amount you're spending typically is a direct reflection of the amount of work we have to undertake, because it also means you're probably, pushing across multiple networks. So you'll see percentage spend fees as part of Google ad agencies, I think way more common than you will for Facebook agencies. And people coming from a Facebook agency look at that and go like, well, why is that? And this is the reason. It's because there's a lot more nuance to some of what we have to do inside of Google.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to be a client right now, and I'm going to come to you, and we have our questions that people ask us like this all the time, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I want to hear how your response to it. So I didn't really just learn, but let's just say I just learned I can do email ads, and I am infatuated with the idea, and I'm not currently doing them. And I come to you and I say, Kasim, can you guys do Gmail ads? I think that's going to be the best way for me to market. What do you think?
It's a really good idea. I love Gmail sponsored promotions. I've seen a lot of success with them. I can tell you that Google has clamped down on our ability to isolate Gmail ads. They actually want you to run inside of their display network. So they're using it as more of a piece of the larger pie. What I'd recommend that we do is first talk about your goals. Because anytime a client comes to me and says, "Oh, I want to run YouTube," or "I want to run search," my question there is why.
Yeah.
Nobody buys a drill; they buy a hole, type of thing. Like, so if a client comes to me shopping for a drill, I try to figure out what their hole is first, not to sound creepy. And if I can do that, then it helps me back into explaining, well, this might be applicable and it might not be. Let's talk about some of the alternatives that are available.
Got you. That's kind of exactly what I thought you'd say. Okay, cool. With YouTube specific, do you have to have specific people that are experts in YouTube and other people that are experts in, say, search?
That's really, yeah. So I think we're at 12 specialists now in total. And we have folks that, are I don't want to say only work in YouTube, but like, I know who my YouTube guys and gals are.
Yeah.
And most of our clients are either in lead generation, so search like professional services or whatever, or they're in e-commerce. And we don't have a ton in the YouTube sphere, but we have enough to have to like do some pretty big deep dives. And typically they tend to be much larger spends too. So it's really important to have the resources on staff to be able to support each of those. But, we don't do much at all in the app space. So if you have an app to seller market, I'd probably refer you away to a different agency. So one thing that I tell people, if they're shopping for a Google Ads agency, it's not a one size fits all, even if they're the best agency in the whole wide world. The question is like, well, what are they the best at? If they're the best at inbound search and you need YouTube or you need, local or discovery or whatever, they might not be applicable to you. So there are more niches inside of Google that are, it's really worth being aware of.
Yeah. And Kasim, can you talk just for a second about what is all on Google? Like we mentioned YouTube here. We've mentioned, Google Display and all that stuff. Just cover really briefly what Google encompasses, because a lot of people don't realize that YouTube ads, for example, they think YouTube ads is like its own separate platform like Facebook, but it's not. Yeah. It's in the Google sphere of things. So talk about that really quick and what Google encompasses.
Dude, that's my favorite topic of all time. Thank you for teaming me up with this one, Jason. I really appreciate it. I've got most talks that I do start here.
Cool.
It starts with letting people know, because if you ask somebody what is Google, they're like, oh, it's a search engine. And it's like, well, yeah, it is. That's true. But it's also the largest email client on the planet, which, by the way, it's reading every single email that you not only send and receive, but that it's cataloging the people that you're sending and receiving them to. So you might say like, well, Google doesn't know what I say because I don't use Gmail. And my response to that is, yeah, but you communicate with somebody who uses Gmail, so they know what adjectives appeal to you the most. They know your temperament, they know your level of education, roughly speaking, based off of like the grammar usage. It's also YouTube, which is the second largest search engine, and they're cataloging everything in YouTube. It's Google Maps, which if you think about it, Google knows whether or not you're speeding. If you go, it takes a half hour to get from point A to point B, but you got there in 25 minutes and all of a sudden you start getting, car insurance ads or whatever. Google knows where you go, where you live, where you work, where you like to frequent, what you do from a hobby perspective. They're the largest mobile operating system with Android. And because they're the platform, they know who's calling you, who you're ignoring, which, negative information is still information, who you lie to, who you text. And then also think about the B2B infrastructure. So like the entire Google Apps suite, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive, Google knows what my taxes look like. They're reading every single document that you upload into Google Drive. Google knows what my children look like. I use Google Photos. It backs up all my photos. And every single day I wake up, it's really cool, actually. I wake up and then Google gives me my memories. Like 1 year ago today, and I've got two little boys, Sammy and Ronan, and they know the difference between Sammy and Ronan. And, they look as closely as brothers should look. And Google's able to differentiate between those two and other people in my family. So, if you've got photos of, you go out to a barbecue, Google now knows who you're hanging out with. And Google has 70 million demographic and psychographic profiling factors that they use in order to catalog people. Facebook has 55,000. And that's not me trying to draw a comparison in any type of way other than saying,
dude.
Whatever, man.
Yeah, I just overstepped. But Google has Google is terrified of an antitrust suit. And there's a really amazing case study that's worth pulling up. Yeah. In April of 2015, Google told a woman she was pregnant before she knew.
No way.
Based solely off of her search and communication patterns. She didn't even know. And Google's actually touted this own case study. Just Google the terms, Google told me I'm pregnant. And this was 6 years ago. Actually, it's exactly 6 years ago. The article was published April 20th, 2015. Wow. So 6 years ago, Google could tell a woman was pregnant before she knew based off of her search patterns. Think about the speed at which machine learning moves. What does Google know today? And so their ability to predict purchase behavior, they have something called in-market audiences. Like, it's absolutely unbelievable. They know you're going to buy a car before you know.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, well, you just had a baby. People typically upgrade within 6 months and you got a raise over at work.
Yeah.
And I know you're going on that big vacation. So when you come back, blah, 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 you're going to buy a car. Here are some car advertisements. Like, it's unreal what they've been able to accomplish.
That's crazy. Yeah. And that's probably why Facebook and Google, when you're running simultaneously, why they feed off of each other. Is exactly why they do, because Google's so smart, it knows what you do. And I say smart, Google really just it is very smart, but it also it tracks what you're doing, so it automatically becomes smarter because it dives in deeper to what you're doing daily, and that's why it really is so smart for people.
Well, dude, Google Analytics is on 99% of all front facing websites.
Yeah.
Which means, so this is where it gets really creepy. Google knows who has AIDS. Google knows who's about to get a divorce. Google knows, like really if you've done time, like Google knows really sensitive, personal, creepy information about folks, and they're using it. Now they don't let advertisers use it necessarily,
Right.
but believe you me, they're utilizing that data.
Right.
Which is, I mean, there's a reason that there's, people are trying to put a leash on them ineffectively, but it sort of makes sense to me. And I'm a Google advertiser, but I mean, just the amount of information they have. If they've got Google Analytics, they have data on every single website you've ever visited.
Right.
So every website, and forgive me y'all if I'm going too deep here. I don't know.
No, this is great. Keep going.
Yeah. So every porn site that anybody's ever gone to, every dating site, they know who's cheating on their spouse. Like, just an unbelievable, they know what your fetishes are. They know just an unbelievable amount of information. And they're utilizing that in order to, what they really want to do, it's not just about advertising. It's about predicting human behavior.
Right.
Google wants to figure out what people are going to do before they do it. The government, I think the CDC or whoever, they're working with Google in order to predict flu and cold outbreaks. Based off of search patterns and the way people communicate and whatever, it just unbelievable amount of information. And because they're using AI, what gets scary is a lot of their predictive abilities, and you'll hear Google engineers talk about this if you dive into that content, they don't understand it themselves.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, we can predict this, but we don't know why yet. We don't have the lag and lead indicators to even help us understand how the machine has been able to figure that out. I'm not a smart enough person to really understand AI, to be honest with you. I've tried, but the fact that there are machines out there that do things that the humans don't understand, that freaks me out.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, it's out of control actually. And thanks for diving into all that, because I don't think people realize, I think data is a little more of a topic right now. We've recorded episodes on the whole iOS update and all that stuff, but because that's the misconception right now is with this whole iOS update coming up right now on Facebook. Well, it's already here. It rolled out on Monday, and people don't realize that they're still being tracked by Google. They're still being tracked by Apple. You know what I mean? And it's amazing that, okay, cool. Once I opt out, that means my phone's not going to know what I'm doing. Guess again. You know?
Not true. It will absolutely know what you're doing. Yep.
So Google has assumed the role of government entity, because it rolls out its privacy policies and it's like, oh yeah, we won't be providing data to these people and your data is protected this way. What they don't say is they're still collecting the data in greater degrees than ever. It's like, yeah, you make it a little bit harder for the advertiser to canvas the way that they want to canvas, but Google's still using that data for their intent-based audiences, in-market audiences, affinity audiences. So that data is being used one way or the other.
Yep.
It's the biggest violation of personal privacy we've ever experienced on a global scale. And what's funny is people like it. They like personalized ads, even if they don't say that. Their actions speak louder than their words, and they respond to them.
Well, and that's what we've said about the iOS update too. If Facebook can no longer, if they're trapped and they can no longer give you the customer experience that you've been used to. Dude, I don't want to get ads about raising a cat or something when I'm into motorcycles or something like that. You know what I mean? And that's what's going to happen if Facebook can't effectively track you. Is you're going to start, your news feed is going to be filled with stuff that you don't really want, and it's going to impact the user negatively, because Facebook is all about, which Google does. I mean, Google is, but Facebook is all about a positive user experience. That's their motto, and I know Google is to a certain extent, but Google just, man, it's crazy what the AI is capable of doing and learning and showing you, predicting, all that stuff.
Yeah. So Kasim, I have a question on mobile. What are the most used apps on mobile specific?
Google Maps, I think, is one that people discount, because if you're an iOS user, you might think oh yeah, well, Google's not tracking me, and I'm like, no, yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Apple tried that, they failed.
Right.
And then honestly, it's the usual suspects, right? Like Facebook is obviously huge from a mobile perspective. As far as are you asking about apps that have GDN installed that you can advertise through? Yeah.
So for us, Instagram is on everyone's phone, right? So from a Facebook, Instagram perspective, a lot of people have the Facebook app. A lot of people have Messenger, WhatsApp, but really it's Instagram and the Facebook app. From a Google standpoint, if I had to guess, I would say Google Maps and Gmail. But what would you say are the top apps tracking people for Google? The whole ecosystem.
The Google Apps suite the people that use it heavily. So if you're using like Google Docs, Google Drive, Google Sheets, Google Presentations, Google Photos, they come preloaded on every Android device, and they'll actually automatically back up your data unless you specifically opt out in a lot of cases. And what's interesting about them is they're just so multifaceted. You know, there's such a swath of things you can do with Google Drive versus Google Sheets, just for instance. And the information that Google's able to glean from all of that, I think, is really significant. And what's really interesting, too, to think about is if you're using Gmail, open an Excel file from within Gmail. The preview's in Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Same thing if you open a document, you know, and I even think their PDF reader ends up being a Google app. So what Google's trying to do is they're trying to be like a self-contained internet almost, to where every piece of information that you send, receive, share, view, they're even doing it with web visits now. I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but if you click on a website, as often as not, you end up on an AMP page, an AMP page, which is a Google delivered page. If you look at the URL, even though you're technically on that company's website, the URL says it's Google delivered. And what's happened is Google's basically cached that page, and they're delivering their version of it. You never actually made it to the company's website, which, you know, again, makes them sort of this self-contained internet. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers your question from an app perspective. Like the Google app suite, I don't think they've done as good a job as Facebook has at funneling people through their app specifically. But in some ways, it's kind of to their credit too, because there's just all these little honeypots, these little traps everywhere, where if you're traversing throughout the internet or on your phone, you're going to ultimately end up engaging with a Google system or service, regardless of whether or not you even know it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So now for the big one. And this is one that we interviewed the founder of Wicked Reports a month or so ago. And you guys seem to be better positioned for the iOS update. We're good. Like as an agency, we've come up with a good solution, you know, the Facebook Conversions API for both e-commerce and leads. But Google just seemed, with all those touch points that you described, to be semi better equipped to be less impacted by that update. Tell us how the iOS update has impacted you on the Google side.
Well, it's going to be a domino effect. So I think Google's direct impact is going to be almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. Just because they've calibrated from so many different angles that, you know, any data loss is A, minute, and B, can be very easily supplemented elsewhere. However, what I do see happening, or what I think is going to happen anyway, and, you know, if I actually knew what I was talking about, I'd be a much, much wealthier person. So, you know, nobody go buy stock based on my advice. But I think what's going to happen is, A, you're going to get a lot of dummies that are running Facebook ads, but without an agency, or at least they don't know what they're doing. And with the loss of data in Facebook, you're going to see increased CPMs.
Yep.
Because, you know, as people lose data, they have to spend in order to acquire more of that data.
Yep.
And the Facebook ecosystem in the short term is going to get a lot more expensive. I actually think that it does y'all a favor. I think that Facebook agencies just became more relevant and more necessary than ever.
Absolutely.
Used to be able to run without Facebook ad agencies. I wouldn't touch Facebook without a guide at this moment in time. But what that does is it forces all of these advertisers that used to have something figured out. Now they need to go look elsewhere.
Yep.
And I think where they're going to look is YouTube and Google Display, among others, right? But those are, you know, if you're going to the traffic stores, Google and Facebook have like 99% market share. And then there's not even a close, you know, I don't know who else to even to pair it up there. You know, you can run ads in LinkedIn or Twitter or Reddit or Snapchat or, you know, any of those things. But there's the amount of traffic is very small, and nothing's analogous to Facebook. So you're going to have a bunch of advertisers that want to go elsewhere, but they have all their pre-built funnels, all their sales narrative, all their hooks. And the closest thing to Facebook at the moment is going to be YouTube. So I think the really big impact from an iOS perspective is going to be a massive influx in advertisers running on YouTube. And what that's going to do to the competitive landscape, I think, is pretty obvious, right? Like they're just going to bid up some of these CPCs. And Facebook advertisers, I think, tend to be more sophisticated because they've had to learn how to bring a customer from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel.
Well,
Google advertisers are spoiled because we go direct response. And so you're going to have a lot of crack advertisers that just never opened up YouTube because they didn't need to, moving into the YouTube space. And they're going to muscle out a lot of the people that right now, up until today, have been, you know, honestly, like kind of fat and happy, benefiting from this really cheap YouTube traffic that up until this point hasn't been super competitive.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's one thing that me and Jason were talking about is, you know, we even have clients that are still, and just, I mean, this isn't going to come out for a week or so, but that are still like fighting us. And just to kind of tell the audience where we're at, iOS started the update 2 days ago. So as of the day we're recording this. So essentially what we're seeing the impact in Facebook is two things. Number one, delayed attribution. So numbers are dropping, but not technically dropping. And then number two, a gradual scale of as people opt out, you can't track them. We'll see numbers inside of Facebook drop. Now we're prepared as an agency. We have third-party reporting. We're good to go. I cannot imagine the small businesses today that are looking at their numbers going, what happened? Or the agencies, like we were privy to, webinars from Facebook saying, guys, prepare 6 months ago. So we've been preparing this forever because we have account managers and partner managers at Facebook. But it's really just, we feel like people are going to need us more because now it's become way more complicated on Facebook and Instagram. And, I don't want to say we've figured it out because it's a constantly moving, changing thing. As far as our agency, we have figured out how to continue to serve the traffic and profit and scale profitably and optimize daily. And that's the toughest thing that the iOS update is taking away. And without guidance, it's going to be tough for people.
Oh, yeah. I actually think there's a huge opportunity here because, anytime there's blood in the streets, right? Like you have the chance to go kind of seize market share. And as that tumult expands, I think really smart advertisers that know how to, kind of lean into it the way that y'all do, I think that they can go and capture amounts and levels of audiences in ways they wouldn't been able to, or, at least ingrain themselves. And I don't know, man, I've tried to train myself anytime I see a shakeup to get excited.
Yeah,
that's a good approach. Yeah, that's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, and what I think is going to happen as well is you're, on the Google side of things, Kasim, is you're going to see these agencies like us who only do Facebook and Instagram are now almost forced, because they don't really know what's going on. They're going to be forced to start offering Google, start offering YouTube, and be this this agency where they're okay at running all of those, but they're not really good at running one platform, and it's going to be better for us. The only downfall to us is I get on discovery calls with clients who call us and say, oh, hey, well, the last agency burned me. Well, how did they burn you? Well, they just did X, Y. So that makes us have to jump through more hoops, especially the better agencies who really know what we're doing. But that, for me, that's really easy to mitigate, because as soon as they jump on a call with me, we had it last week. A client came to us and they want to interview all these agencies. They interviewed 5 agencies, and I was supposed to do an audit, but he comes back and says, hey, Jason, you know what? I just want to go ahead and start with you guys. The other agencies were horrible. No one knew what you knew. And I'm like, well, and I'm not trying to brag about our agency. We're a great agency, but the bottom line is this, is we're really damn good at Facebook, right? You're really, really damn good at Google. And that's the kind of agency you want. And we don't want this free for all either on these platforms. We want to be really good at it, and this whole iOS thing has not scared us by any means. Like you said, it's actually, and I told Eric this, a month or two ago, Eric, I said, actually, this is going to help us, because now advertisers who didn't want to hire an agency are now going to have to, because it's going to get even more complicated than what Facebook already is.
Yeah.
Right? 100%.
And Facebook's already complicated. And I hate going online, or I'll get served with ads, which is hey, pay me $500 and I'll show you how to run high quality Facebook ads in an hour. I just laugh. I'm like, go ahead, buy that course. Yeah. And then you're still going to come to us anyways, because you're not going to know what you're doing.
And one of the things, and Kasim, I would be curious to hear how you guys approach this at Solutions 8. So one of the things that, I've worked with Jason for about 1.5 years now, maybe a little more. And one of the things that I quickly noticed, first of all, he takes this stuff really serious. And that's kind of the nature of our agency. And what you were describing a minute ago, Kasim, is I don't know if, we do consider ourselves good, but we consider ourselves the most dedicated to figuring it out. And there's a couple things, and I'll touch on one of them. And then, Kasim, I want to hear how you guys handle this. One of the biggest things that we always do as an agency when new clients come to us is, a lot of times there's I should say 2. Number 1 is people are going to ask us, what can you get me, your cost per lead or your CPA on Facebook, because my buddy got me $1 leads. And we really quickly weed that out from the very beginning and make sure that they know. The second part is we don't do vanity metrics. We don't do them. We never do them because, and the analogy I always like to use is it's like an apartment building. You're leasing it up and you can book tours all day with, free meals and free donuts and do tours all day and not lease up one. We do not do that. And that's a part of how we handle clients. And that was also something in the beginning, Kasim, that when we look at partnerships, one of our things is always being able to push back on the clients. And that's kind of why they respect us, is because we tell them no on CPA. So is there anything like that that's different in the Google ecosystem?
Well, dude, honestly, you could have just been reading from our employee manual. I tell people a couple of things. I think we're one of the best, most respected Google Ads agencies on the planet. And, do I think we're really good at what we do? Yeah. But the other thing that we do is we manage expectations really well.
Yep.
Hey, 50% of all Google Ads campaigns fail in the first 90 days. This is a test. We might get to the other end of this and find out that it didn't work. And what's funny about that is so many business owners, the reasonable ones, are like, oh, thank goodness. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. As opposed to the, here's the other thing, dude, is I've been this kid. I don't say that stuff because I'm like, super integrous and just like a better person than everybody. I say that stuff because I was a young entrepreneur. Once I started my business when I was 20 years old. And I remember like going like, oh no, you don't understand. I can definitely do this. I guarantee results, blah, blah, blah. And it was always a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
So as I got older and as I matured, I started to say, you know what? Honesty is just the best policy. I'm going to tell the truth. And I did it out of like, jaded, grizzled veteran, like, pain points, but people respond to it really well. So I think managing expectations, number one, and number two, I pick the winners. I've got a phenomenal slate of case studies, but that's because if I don't think your product's going to fly, I don't advertise for you.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, like, y'all, this isn't going to work for you. Here's why. I don't take residential realtors, for instance. It's a freaking snake eating its own tail. Mm-hmm. Every idiot goes off and gets themselves a real estate license, and then they go hemorrhage money inside of Google before they realize that, Zillow, Trulia, all these Redfin, Open Door, they're all, paying $30, $40, $50 per click. And all these little residential realtors can't keep up. A lot of general dentists, same story. Like there are industries that we just either won't touch or I have massive disclaimers about. So, and then as far as vanity metrics, my sales team can't submit a new client unless they provide a goal. We have something called the Go form. I have 2 salespeople on staff. Actually, a third. We just hired a number 3. And I don't even like to call them salespeople. They're just consultants, really. Like they're it's consultative sales. But they're not allowed to submit a client through the Go form unless they define a very clear goal, which means we can't take a client on unless the client has given us a very clear, measurable goal. How many leads do you want? What's the cost per lead? What's your ROAS? And only one, by the way. You can't give me 4. It's like, well, I need 50 leads. And I'm like, all right, we're going to play that game because you're going to find out that what you really want is 10 qualified leads.
Right.
But you're asking me for 50 leads because you're so used to the previous campaign that the other guys were running. And I'll back into their KPI first, and then I'll teach them how it is that we're going to adjust it. But when our sales team submits the goal, the other thing that happens is our client managers, then we have a task instead of teamwork. When this all gets rolled up, they reconcile that goal with the client in our kickoff call. So the salesperson says, this is what the client wants. And then we build the campaign. And the client manager comes back around and says, hey, this is what you told us you want. Is this still the case? Because so often people sign up, seem super reasonable, tell us like, oh yeah, no, it's okay, and give us a really easy target. And then the minute we get to running, now it's like, oh no, we have to have 500% ROAS just to break even. And I'm like, well, if you told me that, I wouldn't have taken you.
Right.
So
yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, and we do this, and that's why I think we get along so well as agencies, is because we do the same exact thing. My first question, if it's an e-commerce store, okay, what are your margins? Well, why are you asking me about my margins? I care more about ROAS. No. What are your margins? Because that's going to tell me what minimum ROAS we can get for you to be profitable. So we always work it backwards, and then, KPIs first. Okay, well, but your KPIs are great. But what I really need to know is how much is the revenues the company bringing in? What are your margins, so we know how to effectively market this thing? And what are your current goals? And oftentimes what we have to do is kind of revamp their current goals completely. And Kasim, I mean, you've heard me, you and I have talked several times about a client in particular where I'm like, and you just said it a minute ago, I'd rather get you 5 qualified leads that purchase your $12,000 program than get you 50 leads at $3 a piece and none of those convert. right?
Yep.
And like that's the big thing right now. And again, like you see all these ads on Facebook and Instagram and all these things. I can get you $4 leads. No, he can't. He says he can, and he shows all these screenshots, but like, I want to know how many of those converted. I could care less if you got 100 leads. Like, how about you tell me, hey, we boosted this guy's ROI by 50% because we got them qualified people through the door who took action and converted, right?
Yep.
That's the biggest, like, everybody wants to make money, so that should be the KPI. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then just to add to your point, Jason, because we were talking about this yesterday, Kasim, is that then you look at the flip side of that. And we actually had a client come to us not too long ago and basically say, you know, our other agency is sending us all these leads and our sales team is like swamped morning to night, and not one of those leads converted. Not one. And so when we push back on people and we tell them, like, look at the flip side of the story, because if we fill up your sales team with leads that are not going to convert, you're actually going to be mad at us. And then once we explain that, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, and that's something that Jason's really pounded in with our team, is just making sure that the second someone starts asking us for like low CPAs or, you know, high number of leads, we always dive into the thought process and the KPIs behind it. And what, like, kind of like what you said a minute ago. Well, it's exactly what you said a minute ago, Kasim, is what's your goal? Where do you want to go? And we'll figure out how to get you there based on our ecosystem. And if it doesn't work, we're going to tell you no, because a product that doesn't sell, if we run ads for it, is still not going to sell. So,
yeah, we tell our clients no a lot, and we push back a lot. And I think instead of somebody getting mad at us, they should say, oh, wow, actually, you know what? These guys are pushing back because they care about results. They care about getting us the highest results possible, and not just telling us, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do it, no problem, and being like a yes man and just bending over. You know, can't do that.
Well, dude, that I care thing, like that means I've got it on my website. Our 3 core values are truth, responsibility, and love. Mm-hmm. And I don't say love because it turns a lot of people off. Like, people don't like that word. So we'll say heart, truth, responsibility, heart. But for me, it's love. And Jordan Peterson, who's my favorite thought leader, he says that love is just the desire that all things flourish. And I want nothing more than to take every client that comes in through the door, and I want to see them do well, because that means that the world does well. Their employees do well. Their clients do well. Their community does. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way to impact the world in a positive way. And I take that, I take it so seriously.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to do something stupid, you know, I'm not in a position where I'm like, all right, well, it's your money, let's just do it. I don't like those people. That abdication of responsibility pisses me off. I'm going to say, hey, y'all, this is the wrong way to do it. I'm not on board. Come back to me wanting to do it the right way. God bless you. I'll refer you off to other people if you want me to, but this is just, you know, it's just not the way that we're going to run things. And exactly what you just said, people appreciate it. And they know that we care. Dude, I've had knockdown, drag out fights with clients who are like, no, we have to do it this way. And I'm like, no, we don't. And we're not going to. And then, like, at the end, it may take some time for the dust to settle, but they'll come back and thank me. Like, man, you didn't have to do that. I really appreciate the fact that you cared enough to invest the time, because sometimes it's easier, faster, cheaper to just say yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, we've been going for a bit now, and we'll probably do a second episode on this topic. But one thing I want to cover really quickly, and I'm thinking about it, is, Kasim, tell everybody why you guys don't do Facebook ads. You know what I mean?
We tried. We tried and we failed miserably. That's what it is, dude. Like, I just found out, like, I'd rather be really, really freaking good at one thing.
Right.
Really good at one thing. And, you know, again, as a young entrepreneur, my company is called Solutions 8 because I had 8 core service offerings. And I thought I was good at all of them. We did web and software and apps and content marketing and SEO and video production. I had a green screen studio and a, you know, videographer and an editor on staff. And, you know, of course, we're doing Google and Facebook. And I used to call them the same thing, by the way. I just called it all PPC. Oh yeah, we do PPC. And I mean, you need a triple PhD for any one of those.
Yeah.
You know, and to go and pretend that you're going to be, I lost a client very recently, and it's one that I wanted so bad. I loved them. Amazing offering. They're in the SaaS space. Well-funded, super reasonable expectations. And I loved their product. I loved everything about them. And we crushed the eval. And we ended up losing them. And I had a good enough relationship with the point of contact. And I asked her why. And she goes, yeah, you know what? Honestly, the CEO just wanted to write one check. They wanted one person that could run our Google and our Facebook. And they wanted SEO all bundled into that. And they asked if we could do that. And I was like, look, I can refer you to my friends that are amazing at this. But no, we only do the one thing. And in my mind, I'm like, you'll be back in 6 months.
Yes,
You'll be back in 6 months. Either that or you're writing that one check to somebody that's just outsourcing to me. They're just white labeling my service.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question directly, I can't do Facebook ads as well as you can. And if I want to be integrous and really take care of my customers, I'd rather just refer them to the folks that I know can frickin' crush it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we run into that too. And that's exactly why we don't do Google, is because we just want to be really good at Facebook. Facebook's complicated enough. I don't want to take on another platform that we just, I'd rather refer them to you. But it's kind of funny how the ecosystem works. Normally, they start out on Facebook, or they'll call you or me and say, hey, what should I start with? Well, how much are you spending? Oh, I'm only spending $5,000 a month. Okay, you should probably start out on Facebook. And then once you do a little bit more, then maybe go to Google and start there. What's your opinion on that? Like, if I was a client and I came to you and said, hey, Kasim, I only have a few $1,000s to spend, is it better served on Facebook or is it better served on Google?
Depends on what so if you're looking for awareness building, if you have a new product nobody's ever heard about, or you're creating something that needs interest or needs a really strong explanation, I think Facebook is a better look. We had a gal who created a new Snuggie for, I've got 2 little boys, and I remember when they were little,
dude.
And us being able to swaddle the babies was a freaking nightmare. And she created this baby swaddle, and it was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't make it work on Google though, because you're looking at it against 30 other baby swaddles, and you don't realize that there's something really unique about it. So I think Facebook for awareness building is the go-to. I like Google if there's inbound. If somebody's going like to Google saying like, my head hurts and you got a special type of headache medicine, or, whatever. Like if people are searching for what it is that you're doing, I like Google because it's extreme bottom of the funnel. I call it high commercial intent. If they have high commercial intent, what I get to do is I get to make you money right out of the gate. And here's the other thing. This is a weird thing for a Google ads agency to say. I don't think you should be in Google forever. I actually think that you should move up the funnel, go to YouTube, go to Facebook, go to display, go to content marketing, go to SEO, because Google ads is expensive. It's the most expensive traffic you'll ever buy. It's also the most valuable traffic you'll ever buy. So I like to start at Google, especially if your spend is low, but at least high enough to support it, say $1,000 or $2,000 a month. What's nice about that is I get to help you monetize right out of the gate.
Right. And
now that you're profitable, we take those profits and we reinvest it elsewhere, like, Facebook, and move up the funnel.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Yeah, because, it's like that with anything. It's best to just be upfront with the client. Hey, listen, if you're offering this, you're probably better served on Facebook, and then you refer them to us. If and we do the same thing. If we think it's better on Google, then we refer them to you, and they get it done that way. So, that's awesome. All right. So Eric, what else do we want to cover today on this episode? Before we end it, we've already been going for about 50 minutes. I don't want to.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the last question I have, Kasim, because there's like 5 other things I want to talk about, but I think we circle back, and do another one of these in a couple months or maybe sooner. And Kasim, this has been really insightful. It's really like all those metrics in the beginning are psycho. Like that's crazy stuff. But real quick, on a final note, share with the audience about your book and some of the core principles within your book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book in 2017. It's not on Google Ads at all. It's just on marketing, and I really put my heart and soul into it. A lot of people write a book just to say that they wrote a book. I spent some time on it. And I only say that because if you invest in it, I want you to know that, it's my best foot forward. So if you don't like it, then you just know I'm an idiot. And I've got the 7 critical principles of effective digital marketing, which is an annoying book title, but I split tested that among 30 other titles. And that's the one that won, just so y'all know. And I split the principles are split into 2 facets. There's what I call the paradigm principles. And then there's the process principles. The paradigm principles, they're the first 3 principles. They're the approach that you take to marketing. The paradigm that you assume. And the very first paradigm principle, and honestly, I think the most important principle of all 7 is empathy. I think if you learn nothing else but to improve your empathic skills, put yourself in your customer's shoes, really start to think from their perspective, how do you help them and serve them? I think if people learn to be an empath, and it's so funny because I think people are naturally empathic. You just ran into somebody on the street, like I think that's an empathic person. The minute you put a suit and tie on them and put them behind a desk and they start writing sales emails or whatever, like something about, for whatever reason, empathy goes away when we start thinking from our own perspective. So, you could actually skip my book if you just spent a couple hours meditating on the concept of empathy, because I think that's the most important thing that we can learn as marketers.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Really cool. And Kasim, you also before we jumped on, you said you really wanted to touch on a couple things, either about Facebook or Google. And what are those last couple things you wanted to touch on that maybe either we didn't get to today, or some key points that you wanted to just bring up?
Well, the most important thing we already kind of hit, but I'll hit it again. Google and Facebook feed each other.
Yes.
There's this weird or. It's like, oh, should I run Google or Facebook? And I can do. We're world authorities in smart shopping. We've got a challenge coming up, the 3x Shopify challenge for e-commerce stores specifically, and every single Shopify or every single smart shopping campaign that we run, with almost without exception, the ROAS improves the minute the client starts running Facebook ads. Here's where it gets crazy. Our ROAS improves even if their Facebook ads are break even or losing, because you're driving traffic from Facebook and maybe they're not buying right away, and maybe Facebook isn't able to track all those purchases, but the customers are now in the Google ecosystem being remarketed so heavily that they'll come back and purchase.
Yep.
And so that loss leader from Facebook helps improve our ROAS from Google to a point to where it ends up making it worth it. And that's one example of 100,000. So people need to stop looking at it as, is it Facebook or Google or whatever? Like, I think it's you want to go omni-channel, and you want to find the best people at every one of those channels and then have them work together the way that we work together. And if you do that, that's the way to be successful.
Yep. And I also want to touch on what you talked about earlier, and I totally agree with you. It's a whole ecosystem. Facebook feeds Google, vice versa. And I kind of get a little annoyed when I hear a CEO tell us, and what that gal you talked about told you, oh, I want to write one check. Well, if you write one check, that company is not going to be able to do what you and I do on Facebook, or what we do collectively on Facebook and Google. I mean, is it that hard to pay 2 invoices? You know what I mean? Because you're going to get 10 times the result from an agency that claims that they're experts in all of them. You know what I mean? And that just, I think that's a vanity metric myself, with companies, like, oh, we want to write one check. Dude, come on. Do you want the best result? I assume you do. So think outside the box a little bit there, and, go with the agency, like you said, or the agency or person, whoever you're doing business with, that will get you the best results, because that's what it comes down to. This is a results-based business, and that's what we need to concentrate on. So
yeah, and before we go, let's take a couple more minutes before we wrap here, and we can wrap because we've been going for a while, but let's talk about why for a second, because that is important. I think when people hear that, they don't understand why. And it really is as simple as, can you be the best at football and be the best at baseball? You cannot do it. Now,
you tell that to Deion Sanders.
Exactly.
Okay, let's try tennis and basketball. But so and to go a little bit more into that, why is it so tough to be good at multiple things? Well, number one, I'm going to come up with a couple reasons I've realized why. You're talking to reps inside of Facebook. We have our own reps. We have account managers, partner managers. We have compliance people that we talk to, people that get account. Like, a lot of clients come to us and say, help, I've been with 4 agencies. My account is still shut down. What do I do? And we get it back up sometimes in a couple of hours. Sometimes that's because we have connects inside of Facebook. We do webinars constantly inside of Facebook, telling us how to better our practices. We optimize every single day for Facebook, morning and night. Our ads managers are required to optimize twice a day, or at least review the account twice a day. And so they're conditioned to a certain type of activity. And so for me, it's very straightforward on the inside, but it's tough to communicate to clients on the outside. Anything to add there, Kasim?
Dude, I think you nailed it. I actually think the technical proficiency isn't what causes issues. I could learn. I'm a smart cat, and I've got a bunch of smart people working for me, and y'all are too. I could learn the technical components of Facebook. Maybe it'd be hard. There'd be a lot to fit in my brain, but I could learn it. But then there's like the structural, right? So you have the whole infrastructure, the processes, the connections, the network, the relationships. And then maybe more important, it's not like knowing how to do things right. It's also knowing how to respond when things go wrong.
Yep.
Yes.
Most of like building a Facebook campaign or building a Google Ads campaign, yeah, you can probably figure that out. You watch, 150 hours on YouTube, and you can figure out how to build a kick-ass campaign for sure. And then put money into it. And what happens on day one, click one, when this gets penalized or that gets turned off, or, whatever ends up happening, like, and I mentioned at the beginning of this call, the thing that I'm best at is failing. I've just made all the mistakes that you're going to make. So if I try to learn Facebook tomorrow, it's not just about learning how to, the positive, it's about learning the negatives. And the only way to pay for that is in blood.
Yep.
The only way to pay for that is in blood, sweat, and tears. And I would just rather not write that check. We already wrote it for Google. We're already the best at what we're doing at Google. I have more than, that's the other thing to think about with agencies that, try to dilute themselves. I have more clients than I could ever want. The Google ecosystem is so big. So if an agency is reaching with both hands saying like, oh yeah, we do that too. Oh yeah, we do that too. Part of you's got to wonder like, man, you just might not be very good at the things you're doing if you keep trying to capture my business elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. And it's good to have someone in your back pocket that we can come to like you guys when we need help. Right. I mean, that.
Oh, bro. So just so everybody knows, I called Jason, tears in my eyes. It was, what was it, 4:00 in the morning when I texted you?
Yeah.
So I've got a consulting client and he's running Facebook ads and, I'm his consult on it. So, it's something that I'm responsible for, even though we're not necessarily running them, let's say, but he spends $500,000 a month or whatever, like really significant. He's a big name in the industry and a big deal to me. I really like him. He's a good friend. And I was convinced something I did got his Facebook ad account shut down. Now that ended up not being the case, but at the time I thought it was me. And so I hit it and I had I tried everything, every chat, every, customer service, I hit all these Facebook groups that I'm a part of asking for help. Nobody could do anything. And I reached out to Jason and we were actually pretty fresh in our relationship.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have any karmic points with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you didn't owe me any favors, but I was just like, bro, please, like whatever you can do. And I don't remember the exact timeline. What was it, like 72 hours later you had that thing back up?
Yeah, I think it was more like 24, but yeah, it was pretty quick. Yeah.
It was lightning fast. Yeah. It was lightning fast. And I was and it would have taken me weeks. But I don't have the relationships, the know-how, even if I had the relationships, I don't know how to say what's wrong in the first damn place. So, that's just another good example of just paying for the quality that's necessary and knowing who to call at the right time.
Yep, for sure.
And there's a lot of stuff that, just to add to that, I know we're keeping going here, but just to add to what Kasim just said is, there's things that people don't know. For example, Facebook has secret shopper surveys. And if you're not an agency and you don't have an account manager and understand that, you're looking at it going, why is my page score down? Why am I, why? Well, it's because Facebook's sending out secret surveys asking people how your business is, and they're saying it sucks. And they would never know that without us. So there's all kinds of, and I could only imagine trying to figure that out on the Google site, Kasim. I have no idea. So yeah, man. So, okay. That's all I have to cover. This was a really good, intriguing conversation for me. I really enjoyed it. Anything you guys want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to add, Kasim, we appreciate everything you do for us, the agency. Personally, I consider you a great friend. In many respects, a mentor as well. And man, look forward to many, many years of a great relationship. And let's keep killing it for clients, man. Excited.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm grateful I found y'all and appreciate being on the podcast. I love talking about this stuff. So hopefully there's some value here. I know I go off the rails way too often, but I'm flattered to be invited. So thank you.
Yeah,
man, it was good. So yeah, seriously, thank you, Kasim.
Yeah, and then Kasim, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and where they can find you and find your agency and hit you up for some Google ads.
Yeah, if you need Google ads help, go to sol8.com, sol8.com. And the last thing I'll say is we've got a YouTube channel. I shoot a YouTube video every single day. So just search for Solutions 8 on YouTube. You'll find us. And it's all Google ads specific. Someday I'm going to have my buddies Jason and Eric on the channel as soon as we start doing interviews and, pay it forward.
Awesome. Well, hey, Kasim, again, we appreciate it. Appreciate all that you do. And we love that you put your heart and soul into what you do. That's what we do as well. And for everybody out there, please get a hold of Kasim for some Google ads. And of course, you know where to find us for the Facebook side of things. And we will have version 2 of this conversation in probably a few weeks. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate y'all.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to The Truth About Social Ads. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Please visit our website at truthaboutsocialads.com for show notes and additional episodes. And if you have time, please subscribe to the podcast and please consider rating and reviewing the show if you enjoyed it. That will help other people find us. By the way, I would love to hear from you. Please send me an email at jason@spotlightsocialllc.com with your feedback, questions, or a topic you'd like me to talk about on the show. If you send me a question, maybe I'll read it on the show. See you later. Bye.